Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is HeroQuest, and today I want to look at Loki Battle Mats add-on scenery for RPG Battle Maps, War and Siege, and Town Trimmings editions. And I'd like to see how a lot of this stuff looks on the new HeroQuest 2021 dungeon board, where applicable. We'll look at War and Siege first, and I'm aware that a lot of this stuff is meant to be used on outdoor-themed wargaming mats, such as those found in the wilderness and other outdoor dungeon maps that are sold by Loki Battle Mats. They do follow a 1-inch standard, so you should be able to use these with any laminated surface. This is a pack of 80 plus reusable static clings for use on laminated surfaces, and you can add and remove them as you wish ad infinitum. Let's open this up. The only proper way to deal with these is just to rip this outer plastic right off. We'll dispose of that properly here very shortly. On our War and Siege pack, we have a lot of things suitable for wargaming. Cannonballs and a barrel of powder, cannons. We've got ballistae and artillery. We've got carts that are carrying supplies to the front lines. This particular cart is two-storied, so you can have soldiers on the upper level firing down at enemies below or looking out into the distance to see if there are any threats on the path ahead. We've got what looks like vats of boiling tar that can be sloshed down the side of a castle wall, pouring right over the heads of orcs that think they're clever by climbing up ladders. And we've got these lovely catapults and these stone ball ammunitions that come with them. We've also got some ladders. Now the ladders we could probably put to use in our dungeon, have a sort of multi-storied dungeon. There's more where that came from, so let's look at the rest. I know War and Siege pack would be complete without tents. We have a multitude of different tents. We have just some scattering of dressings that you can place on the ground, such as this axe and shield. This campfire stick is going to be really useful, I think, even if you're using this in a dungeon. It's just a bunch of stones with embers in the middle. Stick? I say stick? It's a sticky. It's a decal. There we go. Good, Ash, use your words. We've got some beds here and some bedrolls. You could definitely throw these into a safe room in a dungeon. You could have this table, which has a map and a couple of tools and baubles on it, as part of a dungeon scene as well. And I think that these bridges, these aren't bridges, these are elevated platforms set up and walkways set up alongside these upwards pointing stakes, as well as these protruding stakes that will help you prevent an enemy sieging your town. I really think, though, that you could somehow incorporate these into your dungeon. So you'll notice, maybe, as we're looking at this in the glossy lighting, that there's going to be a bit of a border around all of these. And as I've demonstrated before, you can kind of pick at the edge of this border. I would apply a little bit of a twist to catch the decal itself, because if you're not careful, these are pretty easy to catch and get the paper underneath. And when you go to peel, you're just going to peel the decal and the paper together. But after you get it off of the laminate sheet there, it's pretty easy to pick up off of your board and re-stick. So there's what a bedroll might look like in our HeroQuest dungeon. If the heroes can get to the center room here and barricade the doors, they can enjoy a reprieve. They can rest in the dungeon, perhaps taking turns watching and making sure no stray goblins get in to poke at their throats while they're sleeping. We've got 3 bedrolls here, so it actually makes perfect sense if you've got a party of 4 and they're taking watches. And again, trying to peel this guy off, and I'm accidentally getting the paper. This has happened every single time I've tried to peel one of these decals off, and I don't have particularly long fingernails at all. So these are dead and wounded heroes, and we can go ahead and lay them down in our dungeons as well to denote that some people have been here before. They have tried to complete the quest at hand. They have failed horribly. Perhaps they were prisoners taken in by one of Zargon's minions or chiefs. And you could also put these heroes down to denote that somebody did indeed sneak into a particular supposed safe room and took out all the heroes while they were sleeping peacefully, necessitating people taking turns for a watch. Perhaps the one who was designated to watch was a traitor. We have a few other really useful elements on this particular page as well. I love barricades, I love the pointing out sticks. I love the sandbags. I love the log on fire here. A useful trap, I suppose, light the log on fire, roll it down a hill, take out dozens of goblins in one go. This is the last sheet that comes with this pack. And we have what looks like a ruined room. We have a lot of different wall sections that could be used in an outdoor area to make it a little bit more crawl feeling. We've got barricades of crates and barrels, just all kinds of minutia thrown together to protect your town from the incoming horde of orcs. We've got some lovely statues that have been vandalized. The attackers have pushed them right off their plinths. Yes, we actually have 2 of those. And we have a cart that was making its way and was completely ruined. There is one homemade HeroQuest quest in particular that was submitted to the last quest jam that was supposed to take place in a town, and the point of it was to make sure that all of your reinforcements were up to snuff per wave of enemies so that they wouldn't get taken out and the enemies wouldn't invade the town. And how well you did was determined by how much attention you paid to your barricades and where you placed your heroes. And these particular assets would make a great proxy for those materials in the quest, because otherwise, you're just using pieces of furniture from the HeroQuest game system, which is totally fine and makes that quest very accessible. But this does add a sort of element of immersion to it that otherwise you don't get with just the furniture. So that's War and Siege. We'll leave those on the map, but just so that you can see they're extremely easy to move off. You don't even have to get underneath them. They just immediately start moving once you make contact with them. Peel right off, and then they go right on because they're static cling, so they just cling to the surface. They do not adhere. You might sometimes get where air gets underneath and they bubble up. This does not really ruin the immersion. In fact, it kind of lends a little bit of 3D effect to it. Not because it's doing this, but because it's a bit raised and you can see from the translucent border around it, it actually has a little bit of shadow. It's kind of a neat effect, if unintended. Okay, we're going to mix a few assets. We're going to place some HeroQuest furniture bits on this board. I'm going to remove the dead warriors though, because now we're going to move on to Town Trimmings, a pack of 100 plus reusable static clings for use on any laminated surface. I think that this is going to be my favorite pack because I love the concept of towns in between dungeons and HeroQuest and always have. My actual product though, it came with one more page, and this was kind of static clung to the back of the package, so I don't think this was intended to come with the product. Maybe somebody out there can let me know exactly from which product this is. I think it was mistakenly added, but this actually has, you can see I've peeled these off already in a previous attempt to showcase them before this take, but they seem to be dungeon parts, modular dungeon pieces. So you could actually, if you could obtain this one, you can overlay these on your HeroQuest board, and they do follow a 1-inch standard, so they match very closely to the HeroQuest tiles. The only downside is that you can see through them. They have a little bit of translucency, so I can see, for example, the bricks underneath the stone floor that I've placed down on these static clings. That's not necessarily a deal breaker for me. It's just something that I want to point out. And you can, of course, place these somewhere that makes a little bit more sense, like right here. So even though I can see the stone floor of the board underneath, it kind of matches the design, the aesthetic of what's above it, so it's not nearly as big of an issue. I'm not sure why you'd want to use these to overlay a room. That wouldn't really add or subtract anything. It would be kind of a waste of assets, but you could use them maybe to bridge together 2 rooms or create a room within a room on the board. You just need to tell your players this is a separate room. So you've got line of sight in all of this area if you're standing here, and then this room has got its own door. So like a sort of closet perhaps. Wild. If I can get my hands on this one, we'll review this entire set another time. For now, it's time to rip open the Town Trimmings. I said this about the War and Siege clings. You probably want to use these in an outdoor map. For this in particular, you'd want to use these, I think, on an existing Loki Battle Maps town scene. So if you've got towns and taverns, and we'll take a look and see what these look like in towns and taverns, that would be the best use case for these. But if you've just got the HeroQuest board and you're trying to make towns in HeroQuest, or scenarios involving towns, or perhaps in between dungeon exploration gameplay elements, I think that this would work wonderfully. So first we'll look at what is provided on the back, and on the back we get a bunch of actual doors and a fountain, and we get rooftops. The rooftops are going to be particularly useful if they are the same size as our tiles, which of course they should be the same size as our tiles. They follow the same tile standard, but if the roof size itself is the same size as the dungeon room, then we can infer that there is a building there. So we have a building in this spot. We have a few more that are 2 by some numbers, but we don't have any dungeon rooms appropriate for that size. We do have what looks like a 3 by 3, but there are no 3 by 3 rooms on the board, so it looks like that's the only roof we'll be able to use at this time. We do have some stalls set up, some vendor stalls. We've got a well, and this well you could definitely use wherever you'd like. It doesn't have to be outside. You can very well put it inside of a crypt or a dungeon, and monsters are expected to draw water from here. You can also have this be something entirely different, like a sort of pit in which monsters place their victims because there's an evil monster down below in the chasms. This is not like a regular trap pit. This is a well deep pit that goes down and actually opens up into a much larger, more threatening area. We've got some stairs here as well for travel up to upper floors. You can use these in the corridors. They kind of encroach on the tiles beside. Doesn't matter if you're not going to be using the rooms though. And then you can place doors at the landing or up above to imply that there is a hallway after the landing. I think that that would be very cool to see. I've seen something similar to this effect using the Keller's Keep stairs. We just don't have enough stairs with HeroQuest. We need more stairs. We need more packs that have more stairs, rather. Okay, and I can actually take like the 2 by 5 tile roof and place it here, and it's inferred that we have a building here with a bit of a terrace, perhaps a second level. You could definitely help that inference by placing more elements around it, perhaps like this. That way you can have enemies up here who have line of sight to the heroes. If you're doing a combat scenario and the heroes know that they have to come around here, clearing the arrows and any other shots made by the ranged enemies to come up the stairs and onto this balcony of sorts to fight the enemies. They won't be able to go into the house unless you want them to. And perhaps you could even do something cool, like if they go into the house this way, perhaps you place a door at the edge. This looks a little bit weird, so I probably wouldn't do it this way. I might even use the static cling. There we go. We'll put a door right here this way, unless that's supposed to be a window. It is actually. I think that's supposed to be a window. I don't care. Let's pretend it's a door, or perhaps it is a window and your heroes will have to go flying through the window, which is totally fine. They can come out this side, and this will represent the interior of this building. So instead of having to pick up assets and replace them and whatnot, you've got this sort of video game effect where your character enters a small tile on the board in the overworld map, and they come into a much larger space. It's bigger on the inside. Video game logic. It makes sense anyway, because if these rooms aren't accessible by the outside corridor, then of course it's immersive enough to say that it's the interior of the building. You can even have different rooms in the building. So this would be like the living room area. There would be a lavatory. There would be a storage room. There would be a bedroom. There would be a kitchen, that sort of thing. I think the rooms on the HeroQuest board really facilitate that sort of thing, so it's a shame that we don't have more assets officially to facilitate this sort of roleplay, because you easily have 4 houses and then a 5th house or structure of some sort, perhaps a feature like a fountain in the center of town. This really does work for that sort of situation if you have the right assets to facilitate that scenario. Back to the asset review. Let's go on to the next page. Town trimmings, indeed. Oh, nice. We have even more rooftops. I love that. I think the more rooftops, the better. You can even mix and match rooftops, so you've got different styles, which would not be out of the question to have different styles of houses next to one another. We do have that in real life. But if you work it out just right, you'd be able to place all kinds of different houses like in the middle. And then you have a perfectly plausible sort of cluster of apartment buildings, medieval apartment buildings in the center of town in the center of kind of like winding alleyways. So it doesn't necessarily have to be corridors. We definitely have alleyways that are this thin out there, you know? That first asset I put down may not have been a well, because this is definitely a well. A really, really good well. It's not quite translucent at all. I can place it anywhere I want on the board and it'll make sense. We have a deep well from which to draw water now. This could, of course, still be something that goblins will throw unsuspecting heroes into to feed the Rancor beast down below, so there is that. And here we have the lavatory room, a stall, rather, to be used whenever your hero just needs a quick reprieve from dungeon crawling. That actually fits real nicely right here on the tile. It's even enclosed already, so you don't have to worry about where to put it as long as you're not putting it in a corridor, unless it's meant to be a dead end. And you can come into this room, and this has got its own little door, and it blocks off line of sight, and you're good. You're good to go. And this hole can also be an endless pit in which goblins drop unsuspecting heroes into the horrors below. I'm not obsessed with that idea. You're obsessed. We've got a scarecrow right here. I think this is a really cool asset to put on the board. You can actually move it around in between turns. Sort of indicate that it's possessed. We have yet more rooftops, a couple of larger ones this time, which this is a joy to see because we have a lot of rooms on the board that are this size. This is the 3x5 tile size, if I'm not mistaken. Let's test it out. Oh yes, 3x5, absolutely. I can 100% recommend the Town Trimmings pack already. We have rooftops, which are just invaluable for that immersion, building a town or a section of a city with your HeroQuest board. I'm really enjoying this, actually. We have a lot of doors. We have more than enough doors for the heroes to use to enter these new facilities. We have extra walls that you can use here included. There's another one of these little mini wells. I'm not really sure what that is. It doesn't look like a fire pit. Exactly. It doesn't quite look like a manhole, or, what would be a feudal or medieval or even steampunk version of a manhole. But I don't know. We do have some grates over here. Would this perhaps be a chimney that you'd place? No, because the houses already have chimneys implied on their rooftops. But I suppose you could take this and shoehorn it onto the top of any of these buildings to sort of give the heroes access to what lies below. And you could use the ladders in another pack to have them climb up to the rooftop. Now, this is where things get really, really cool. We have tables. We've got a boat. We've got ladders. So we've already got our ladders that I was talking about here in this pack. We've got our tables with drinks on them for a bar scene or a tavern. We've got some trapdoors, of course, and then we've got our barrels of alcohol, our ones that are set up to serve customers already that you can place at the end of these fine bar counters. You have a wine rack, only the finest wine for my patrons, and some empty tables. You have a bath, a nice big tub full of water. The heroes are going to enjoy a well-deserved soak after that last dungeon. We have carts that you can populate with all kinds of goods. We've got some stacks of crates and such for storage areas. We have a lot of beds, including the elusive two-person bed. This is really just a one-person bed for a lone hero who's willing to pay a little bit of extra coin to get a better night's sleep. And if they pay that extra coin and have all this room to roll around in, please give them temporary additional body points or mind points for their next adventure. We've got some fancy imported rugs. This is definitely coming from the land of the ogres. Look at this eastern snake pattern. We've got crates of fruit or vegetables, or, that could really be anything you can imagine that's red and round. It's a crate of fireballs. Yeah, check that out. We have a bar scene already, and that just took seconds to set up. It was no big deal at all. Just peel and stick. And these will not do any harm to your HeroQuest board or any other surface. They're sticking on purely by static electricity, so they'll remain clung. And if you've ever had any sort of static cling books as a kid, you'll know exactly how these work already. Colorforms, I think, was the brand, the one that I had as a kid. Now, whether this remains a peaceful environment, a safe environment, that's completely up to you, Zargon. We have a huge amount of assets on this last page, and they all deserve a little bit of attention. We've got our own forge right here, which could be very useful for even your dungeon adventures. We have a table full of weapons and tools that are made to forge these weapons from raw materials. We have a vise at the corner of this with a flat top that could be used as an anvil, a couple of forging hammers, some swords in progress. Here's the real anvil, actually. This anvil is already on a stump. It is mounted and ready to be used thousands of times. We've got a fish market cutting board. You could use this in your dungeons. You could have the greenskins definitely setting up to manufacture seafood for the local denizens. Never mind the red and white checkered pattern. I think the goblin just really had a flair for design who put that down. He was rightfully punished later. We've got a couple more countertops with weapons on them. These could be used for merchants within dungeons. We've got weapons racks. We've got shield racks. That's a first. I haven't seen that yet. We've got suits of armor that could be set up to portray how the armor looks on mannequins or models, or these could be statues that come to life and attack the heroes. I mean, why not? We've got a grinding wheel and we have bellows. All of this stuff is suitable for either in town, or perhaps you meet this forge blacksmith in the field. Or, of course, they could be in the dungeon. It doesn't have to be a good guy. It could be a couple of orcs that are working as blacksmiths for the evil master. We've got a table full of bread, full of meat, full of vegetables, full of fish, full of writings, full of... we're going to summon Cthulhu with that one. And we have another table wherein somebody is hastily writing a letter to Penn for help because their kingdom's being attacked, and they had to leave in a rush. You could tell because they didn't even bring their sack of gold, so this place was definitely being threatened. We have a lot of different shelves, lots of bookshelves, trinkets, magical shelves, things that your heroes can search. Perhaps they have to roll a die to search them, and if they fail that die roll, something bad happens. We have some very comfortable looking couches. We have another bathtub that could be used. We have this, which could be used as a door in the floor, or it could be a drain of some sort. All the water goes down there and flows away. Perhaps it's just access to some waterways flowing beneath. I'm having a bit of trouble deciphering what's going on here. I suppose this could be a magic ball, a seer's orb. This is something that your evil wizard's going to contemplate on. Ponder, one could say. We have cases of jewelry and a case with a very valuable sword in it. Finally, a much bigger table, a little bit more suitable, I would think, for taverns and for having your heroes come together to celebrate the success of their last dungeon raid. This is the coolest sheet out of all of them and is probably my favorite because of the versatility it provides. I know you want to see the forge down on the HeroQuest board, so that's what we're going to do. I can read you like a book. See how I'm picking all this stuff up? It just takes seconds, and then suddenly your board is nice and clean and clear. However, I'm going to regret this with every iota of my being later when I try to sort this back out, clean this mess up, and peel those back apart. This is the Dwarven Forge of the artisans Durick and Turek, known throughout the land for their exceedingly high quality of craftsmanship regarding shields, staves, and swords. This dwarven couple is said to have shared this forge for 75 years. It is said when Norik heard Norin's, that is what I called him, right? Norrin and Norik, Dorn and Norin, Doric and Norik, whatever. It is said that when she heard his anvil clangs for the first time, her heart beat in time, and that when he laid eyes upon her for the first time, within him burned a passion hotter than the hottest flames of any forge he had forged within. There's no good way of saying that. Look, as far as dwarvish poetry goes, that was probably really good. Guys, I'm going to clean up this mess now. Thank you so much for joining me on this presentation adventure, and I hope that you'll consider checking out my other videos on Loki Battlemat's products. I have quite a few of them at this point, and quite a few more to get through and show you. Those will come in time. For now, please look forward to the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.